Welcome to Pittsburgh Basketball Live. The Toronto Raptors have made some moves at the end of their roster, and I'm not sure how I feel about one of them, but I do love to hear that Jamison Battle, who clearly stuck out as the best player at the end of the bench between himself, DJ Carton, Ramsey. I believe that Jamison Battle really looked good. And he's 23 years old. He's born the exact same year as Scottie Barnes. He's 2 years younger than Brandon Carlson. I think there's some upside on this kid, and there is some precedent. So we're going to take a look at who Jamison Battle was before he got to the NBA because he doesn't have a body of work in the NBA. He played Division One basketball last year, so we're going to take a look at his stats and we're going to see how they compare, whether favorably or disfavorably, to a couple of shooters that had a very similar track record, which is Max Strus and Duncan Robinson. We're also going to talk about the waiving of Brandon Carlson, Jamison Ramsey, Jared Rhoden, and whether or not any of these end of roster moves could come back and bite the Raptors in the butt. I know sometimes we get very excited about a summer league signing, an Exhibit 10 signing, a two-way signing, and we start to hype these prospects up. One prospect that I remember being hyped up to hell, I think it was a couple of years ago, was Moses Brown. He was a 7'3", 7'2" big man, and we desperately needed a center. And Moses has been bouncing around the NBA for years, and I didn't really feel that was of consequence, but it didn't stop people from losing their minds over it. There is, however, a player, speaking of players who played in Dallas and who are big, there is a big man that I think might have been a better roster addition than Bruno Fernando. If you have missed the tone, I have not been a Bruno Fernando fan throughout preseason. I feel like he's very error prone. He did get the final 50. He did get the 15th roster spot. That means his contract is a minimum and it is guaranteed. And to be completely honest, that is a little bit weird for me. So, anyways, let's talk about it. So I loaded up the analytics and we're gonna take a look at who Jamison Battle was before he got to the NBA because that is the guy who is, going to benefit from that two-way spot. The Raptors, in my opinion, have a collection of two-way prospects that I really think have a chance between himself, Ulrich, Chomche, and DJ Carton. I think all three of those guys you could really see, hey, maybe very soon they could be a reasonable depth piece on the bench. And that hasn't really been the case, for a few years. There's been a lot of wild swings, but you couldn't really see a vision towards it. I could see a very reasonable vision towards Jamison Battle being a rotation player in the NBA. Ditto for Ulrich, less so for DJ, but I could see it. His athleticism could pop at some point. They're all reasonably young. I like it. So, anyways, at George Washington, first, I mean, we saw a negative box plus minus in his second year. Didn't see anything sticking out there other than an extremely high 3-point attempt rate as a freshman. He started 30 games. He's pretty much he has started all but 2 games throughout his collegiate career. And it was last year in the Big Ten for Ohio State where he really popped. And his analytics went absolutely nuts last year. To go from a previous high of 3.6 boxes minus to 6.4, which is really good on 22% usage with a really high 3-point attempt rate of 55%, which, is not quite specialist high, but it's high enough. A very decent free throw attempt rate as well. So it shows you that he's got some of that 3-level potential. And it's not all threes, right? Like some people get very excited when a guy has like a 70, 80% 3-point attempt rate. That to me shows me that you're very one-dimensional as a player. And he's not one-dimensional as a player, as we'll take a look at the clips. I think he's shown a little bit more. I think he'll struggle as a defender. I don't think anyone's projecting him to be a great defender at the NBA level. But again, per 100 possessions, 29 points. And he shot he shot 11 threes per 100 possessions on 43.3% last year and 93% shooting. Now, I don't know what happened with him last year, but it's a pretty healthy sample. 35 games played, over 1,100 minutes, and look at that free throw percentage. Just take a look, right? You've got 85%, 78%, 75%, 78%, suddenly 93%. Okay. This is a guy who got way better. across the board. His shooting has taken like a complete to go from a 31% three-point shooter, and again, on fair volume, right? It's not like he took 7 threes and we're talking about that. No, man, he took 9.5 threes per game at Minnesota and shot 31%. 31% is not a good look, okay? To go from that to 43% on the same volume, actually higher volume, while also improving your free throw rate and while improving your free throw shooting, while also improving your 2-point shooting. I mean, his 2-point shooting went from 44% to 51%. I mean, this is the type of jump, that a player takes when maybe there's a shift in focus, maybe there's an injury that was addressed, maybe there was a new trainer involved, but this is really a weird prospect to look at. I gotta be honest, like that is, I cannot remember seeing anything like this. And you're gonna take a look at Max Strus and uh, Duncan Robinson. You're gonna see that that's just not something that usually happens. So take a look. This is Max Strus at DePaul. Again, he was in the Big East. Another guy who went undrafted. So all three guys went undrafted. And you take a look at Max Strus and slightly higher three-point attempt rate per 100 possessions, but 33.3%. He goes to 36.3%, 80%, 84%. This is kind of what you expect. Logical, slow progression as a shooter, not 31% high volume three-point shooter goes to 43.3% high volume shooter. That's just absurd jumps. Like that's historical levels of improvement, right? So, and of course, Max is now one of the best three-point shooters in the league, and so is Duncan Robinson. But I think this is more in line with what you expect to be a logical progression from a player. Take a look at Duncan Robinson, and you'll see once again there is a slight like a very logical progression. He went from a 45 there's actually a regression. He went from a 45% three-point shooter to a 42.4% three-point shooter to a 38.4% three-point shooter, which probably tells you increased defensive attention, better scouting report, and likely weaker players around him likely influence that. But again, we're not seeing that crazy jump because those guys were already there. They came out the gate, they were that. So with Duncan and with Max, the questions really were far more glaring on the defensive end and far more glaring in terms of do they have the athleticism to be NBA players, right? That was a major concern, just my opinion. So I think that Jamison Battle has a logical chance or a realistic chance to be that type of shooter. So let's take a look at Jamison Battle. Okay, so doing your work early as a shooter, being shot ready. I value these things. I value movement shooting. Obviously, I value guys who can, you know, do other things other than shoot, and we're going to see a little bit of that as well. But take a look here. Bub Carrington has not read the scouting report. He does not take so E-Trick saying, can another team sign Battle to a full contract? No, they cannot. So your two-way is yours. Every team is entitled to up to 3 two-ways and 15 roster spots. As it currently stands, your two-ways cannot be signed away from you. No. However, had Jamison Battle remained on a Exhibit 10 and he had gone potentially to the G League without that two-way qualification, yes, another team could have signed him potentially. And yesterday there was a caller who suggested that perhaps Jamison Battle needs to get this contract because another team could take him away. I have a feeling that while initially I was a little bit like, "What are you talking about? Maybe he doesn't have he doesn't have the pedigree that someone would just jump at him." Honestly, looking at him now and thinking about this a little bit more, I have to say I was wrong. I think if this guy goes into the G League and he has a couple of hot shooting days or a couple of hot shooting games or a couple of hot shooting weeks, some team is absolutely going to sign him to a full contract or a two-way contract and waive somebody else. I'm looking around at all the teams two ways. He's better than a lot of them. At least he projects to be better than a lot of them. So let's take a look at just this shot is so butter smooth. Look, I love shooters. Always have, from Drazen Petrovic to Pedro Stojakovic to Reggie Miller to Allen Houston. Some of my favorite players of all time have been great shooters. This is a great shot. Uh, This is a great shot, man. And his shot is just it's very silky smooth. It's extremely consistent. And I am just I'm right now I'm almost fascinated by his development to the point where I want to go back and watch some of his, early freshman tape and just to see how his jump shot and how his shot profile has changed because I cannot imagine a player with this jump shot and this shot readiness and this size also. It's also worth noting. He's big. He's like 6'7". Okay. Let's take a look here. Brandon Carlson. Okay, he passes, and Marvin Bagley is late. And Jamison Battle, there's no dip here. It's just an immediate right in. Okay. Now here we go again. Boom. And again, there's like you don't need a lot of you need to be able to get your shot off quickly in the NBA. Notice there's no dip. That was a big issue with certain shooters is there's too much energy transfer going down and then up. And by the time you go down and up, whereas a college defender might not have been able to gap out to you, NBA defenders cover that ground too quickly. He really doesn't need that much space. And also, look how deep he is right now. I mean, again, you expect college players, especially college shooters who have a sort of reputation as being college shooters, you expect them to struggle with the increased range. We saw Grady struggle. We've seen a lot of shooters struggle. I think Doug McDermott struggled. Adam Morrison struggled and permanently struggled. There's a lot of shooters, if I'm not mistaken, that have struggled throughout league history. It's not usual that a college sniper just comes and is an NBA sniper right away. But I think that this is really like this. That's what is that, 28 feet, 29 feet, 28 feet. That's 28 feet. Like, and it's okay. He misses it. I gassed that up way too much. I'm sorry. Smart cut, really beautiful cut here, and gets it around. Crafty, you know. And again, he has a weird old man strength kind of game. I mean, I've played with players like this, and if you hoop, you've played with players like Jamison Battle. They're not wiry strong. They're just solid. They're just solid. You know what I mean? Here's Brandon Carlson. And now, again, small things, right? Do you crash the glass? Do you have that awareness? Are you someone who just has a good instinct for the basketball? And this, I think he just gets lucky. I might be gassing that up a little bit, but he gets lucky. And so, anyways, I would love if at some point over as between now and also between now and Wednesday, when the regular season starts, I would love to do a deep dive on the end of the roster, specifically DJ Carton, who he's been, his G League tape last year, taking a look at these guys. I know some people think that these guys don't matter. I know some of you have that mentality. I hope most people in this community know that the end of your roster matters. I'm not a G League nerd. I'm not someone who's going to be like, oh my god, I really love watching G League games. I do because I like basketball, but overall, I think it's important to have that kind of depth at the end of your roster. Okay, how you feel about Carlson getting cut? Okay, we can do a little bit of a Q and A at this point, and I'll just highlight some of the questions. So why don't you guys just feel free to ask some questions? I'm going to highlight them, and so I can get to them right towards the end, and we'll get into how I feel about Brandon Carlson getting cut. I think that it's really important to have that kind of depth at the end of your bench because the G League is useful for a lot of things. Number one, it's useful to shape guys up, right? So you want to get Jonathan Mobo some point forward run, and you're relatively healthy, and you don't have the minutes for him in the main club. Send him down to the G League. You want to get Jakobe some point guard, time. Send him down to the G League. You want to get, you want to get Ulrich Chomche. Obviously, Ulrich is going to spend a ton of time in the G League. But if you want to even if you want to send Jamal Shed down to see if maybe there's a week where you just feel like the matchups aren't right for him. You're playing a lot of teams with really big guards. Maybe that's a week where you send Jamal Shed down. My point is that your G League is a great place for you to experiment. Right? It is a great place for you to experiment. It's good to have mirror players. It's good to have players that can sort of run your system. And It's important when you send a Jonathan Mobo down there that you have guys where when he's creating those shots, that he has guys that he can actually spray it out to, like corner shooters, movement shooters that he can actually work with that somewhat mimic the roster that he has with the regular team. You're not going to get a one for one. I get that. But you should have at least some sort of competent roster balance. Like you should have a guard who can set some stuff up. You should have some spacing via some shooters. You should have an athletic downhill guard who can generate offense, like easy offense, or you should have a shot maker who can, at the end of the shot clock, create something out of nothing in a broken clock situation. Like you need to have that at the G League level. You need to have that in order to just have competent roster balance, and then you can start sending prospects down there. It's also, as I mentioned, a great place to experiment. Experiment with schemes, experiment with plays, to work on plays, etc. It really helps when you can run similar plays, if not the same plays, with the 905 as you do with the regular club, which is exactly what they do anyway. However, it you need certain personnel to run, you need a good screen setter to run certain screens. If you're going to do a dribble handoff, your bigs have to be able to pass the way. Can Ulrich pass the way that Jakob can? No, but he has passing abilities, and so you can run similar actions for both players, right? Ulrich is like bizarro world, way, way, way raw Jakob Pertl with a slight chance to shoot some jump shots occasionally. You know what I mean? Like there are similarities. They're both fleet-footed. They're both good rim protectors. They can both pass in the short roll. Like there's things like that. Like can Jonathan Mobo be the Scottie Barnes of the G League this year? I don't know, but I mean there's similarities, right? And I think that it's very helpful that way. I think Jamison Battle fits in perfectly. I think he's going to do a lot of damage for the G League. And again, it may not be this year, but I think a year down the line, look at how the Miami Heat have used their two-way spots. Look at how the Miami Heat have found these undrafted guys. And a lot of credit goes to the Raptors for finding Fred VanVleet, but he is really the one undrafted guy that they've found. Consider what the Miami Heat have done. Hassan Whiteside, who was a late second round pick, Max Strus, undrafted guy, Duncan Robinson, undrafted guy. Duncan and Max were major parts of a finals rotation for the Miami Heat. They were bargain basement type of players that they got for very cheap. They overpaid them later, and eventually with Max, they let him walk. But that's so much value to get. And with the CBA the way it is right now, with the CBA structured the way it is, it really helps to get guys in the door who actually who have a chance, right? Hmm. There's another one. Okay, keep the questions coming. We're gonna do a Q&A right after. Any questions that you have, I'll star, and just make sure that if you want to help me out, just because I'm a one-man show here, just put 3 stars before asking a question, and then we'll get to your questions. Also, very soon, we will be able to simultaneously broadcast all of these lives onto X/Twitter as well. We'll sign up for a Twitter premium membership, and that way we'll be able to do that as well. So hopefully we'll have even more lively post game shows. There is a player that I think might be better than Bruno Fernando, and he just got cut by the Dallas Mavericks. Now, take a look at Jamarion Sharp. Okay. Jamarion Sharp, and that's the bottom. So Jamarion Sharp played last year for Ole Miss. He was also undrafted. He started 15 games, and those are his per 40-minute numbers. Now, there's a player above, and can anyone in the chat tell me who that player is? 2009, 2010 at Marshall, Conference USA. Who is that player that per 40 minutes average 13 and a half rebounds, 8 blocks, and 20 points per game? I'm very curious if y'all know this. There's nearly 200 of you in here. I'd be surprised if none of you knew this. But Jamarion Sharp is a 7'5" center who is 23 years old. And Timothy Roche, good for you, man. I don't know if you're Coach Roche, if you're the same guy, or if you just have the same last name as him. But if you are, how you doing? Okay. Oh, my bad. Oops. That's funny. That's me. You should call in. You should call in. There's a call-in link. We'll take some call-ins at the end as well. I'd love to hear from you and just get your insight on what you think about some of these players. Anyways, so we're going to take a look at what he did with the Dallas Mavericks. I think he's very interesting. I'll give you my 10-second well, 10 second. I'll give you my 1 minute elevator pitch on him. He moves really well. He blocks shots like it's nobody's business, and he's 23 years old. He rebounds pretty well. His game is very simple, but I like his coordination and balance and athleticism for someone who's 7'5". And I think that if we're just looking at him as a straight prospect, is he a worse player than Bruno Fernando? Yeah, but not by much. And he's a rookie. Cass saying 7'5". Oh yes, sir. These highlights may blow your mind. Okay, let's take a look at it here. Okay. All right. Okay. He is every bit as huge as he looks. Okay. And this is him. That's Laurie Markkinen boxing out Walker Kessler. Just look at that block. I think his hand-eye coordination is really cool. And a big shout outs to Brian for sending this send me a clip of this. So Scottie Strain O'Brien sent me a reel on IG, and I didn't even know they waived him. And I was like, holy shit, because he sent me a reel from Bleacher Report saying they waived him. I'm like, whoa, that's cool. The Raptors could really use a shot blocking 7'5" center on their bench. And if he's free, I don't understand why we look away from this. So holds the screen. Like, he's going over an all-star here, man. That's Laurie Markkinen. Not saying Laurie Markkinen is Hakeem Olajuwon, but that's pretty decent. Okay. All right. Again, very simple game. Very simple game. Okay. This guy does not do very much. I'm not sure if he has any shooting potential. I'm not in the gym with the guy. I'm just saying he's 7'5" and he's available and he's 23 years old and he has incredible fluidity for his size. And again, it would not shock me if this guy actually sticks. And here, I mean that showed pretty good touch right there. And, I like the little flex. He doesn't got a hell of a lot to flex right now, but I love the fact that the young fella is trying to flex. All right. And a little bit of perimeter defense. Okay, you can clearly see like he's toast here on this perimeter coverage. So as coordinated as he is as a 7'5" player, he's obviously not Victor Wembanyama. However, this is about as well as you could expect a 7'5" rookie who does not know the NBA game to actually recover on that. Once he figures out that he has the length, and I mean, I would say that was a foul, but he gets away with it. Okay. And here we go. Principle of verticality. And he times it beautifully. Okay. Not bad. And again, tracks it perfectly and keeps a good balance so that he doesn't get caught flat-footed and blocks that shit right out of the air. I like it. Okay. Oh, look, it's the guy that everyone wanted to draft. Okay. And I mean, this is just goodbye. This is getting blocked. I mean, and it's just it's okay. There's a shot block, and then there's like humiliating shot blocks. This is humiliating. This is demoralizing. Anytime you go up and someone blocks you like this, you get in your feelings. You want to listen to some R&B. You want to get into a bubble bath. You want to lay out the champagne. You want to talk to your moms. You know what I mean? Like this is the type of shit that actually makes you that that hurts. That hurts me to just watch that. Okay? Like that's just embarrassing. Just watch that again. Like, what do you even do? It's not even like I think that's Bryce Sensabaugh. Bryce Sensabaugh is like 6'6". What the hell? Okay. And again, nobody is saying that he's Victor Wembanyama, but man, he's moving really well. So I implore, I hope the Toronto Raptors don't get completely, one track minded about Bruno Fernando. Now, overall, I think that the roster you see today will change. I think it will change once, if not twice, right? I think it will. I don't think that there's any way in hell that you don't make any moves from here till the trade deadline. Like I think at some point you're gonna pivot away from Yak, which would be sad, I guess, in a sense, because you really like the player, but you don't understand it. Or you're gonna definitely pivot away from Bruce Brown, or you're gonna have some shuffling at the bottom of your roster, or you're going to probably, I mean, I guess it's a wait and see approach, right? Bruno Fernando is not a player of great consequence. In a nutshell, he's a minimum contract. He could easily be traded away. He could be easily waived. Like I don't know what the deal carries in terms of guarantee dates and whatnot, but I believe it's a fully guaranteed contract. He'd be cheaper than Bruno. I believe that is true. Yes, he would be. Here's what I would have done if I was the Toronto Raptors, and I'm not the Toronto Raptors, so take this with a grain of salt. I would have given Jamison Battle a 3-year deal, like right now. I know that may not sound very coherent or smart, but I just have a feeling that if you get later into the season and you start playing some of your deeper lineups, he's the type of guy that could really catch some executives' eyes, right? And again, the more of him I watch, the more of his I watched a video which is 48 minutes of all of his some of his shots from last year. It's very impressive. It's very impressive. I can fully see why the Raptors were so high on him. So again, if you signed him to a 3-year deal or even a 2-year plus one, or even have a 3-year deal with a, second year guarantee date or whatever, even if you just got that team control, he's 23 years old. I think there's some significant upside there that he could turn out into like a deep rotation player for you. Seems really smart. He seems really smart just from listening to some of his interviews in college. He seems like really well composed and very serious. Doesn't seem like a high risk prospect at all. It's not a super high ceiling, but also not a low floor either. Like there's almost no chance that this guy's not going to at least be like the 15th guy on a roster type. You know what I mean? Like, and that's what you want in a 15th guy on the roster. You want a guy who's relatively multi-positional and can do one thing well. Like at worst case, he's going to be a 6'7" shooter for the rest of his life. Like that's just what he is. Do you maybe not trust the shooting improvement? I do. I'm seeing it now. I'm seeing it in last year, and I believe that 15 months of being a really, really good shooter is a really long time to be really great at shooting. So I'm for it. So what I would have done probably was I would have given Jamison Battle a 2+1, waived Bruno Fernando. Now let's get to the final. Let's get to that question. Jaden saying, "How do you feel about Carlson getting cut?" This may not sound nice, but I would have cut him. I actually was pretty surprised that they signed him initially. When I did my pre-draft analysis, he was my 103rd or 102nd ranked player in this draft class. Not the super strongest draft class, but as we're seeing, a draft class that is full of very deep players. I did not feel that he had the physicality to be an NBA big. I didn't think that for all of his skills, as a shooter, shot blocker, his size, I just felt like at best case, he's a worse version of a player I don't want. Does that make sense? Like he doesn't have the fluidity or athleticism that would make him Kelly Olynyk light. And I'm not just comparing them because they're both big white guys who can shoot. I don't think that his playmaking was nearly as advanced as I would hope it would be. And if you had told me that he was 20 and not 25, I would have believed you. And some of the advantages that he obviously had playing in Utah last year as a 25-year-old. I mean, look, man, when you're a 25-year-old and you've been a 5-year senior, and a lot of people benefited from the 5-year senior rule because of COVID, you should be dominating, like dominating at that level. He was not the best player on his team. So I think that stuck out to me. And while I understand that there's this theory of a 7-foot shooter, I just never felt like it was ever going to get there because defensively, I don't think that he does enough defensively to warrant what he does offensively. He's an interesting player. I wish him nothing but the best. I wonder if he is the type of big who's going to bounce around the G League for a couple of years and then sign on with an NBA team as a deep rotation big, or if he's the type of guy who will find a much clearer role for himself overseas. And I do think that he will have a good future overseas. He's a pro basketball player, 100%. Like Brandon Carlson is going to play pro basketball for the next 7 years. I'm positive. I don't know where that will be, but I'm positive it will not be with Toronto because they've waived him, and I'm perfectly fine with it. Jamias Ramsey getting waived, I believe, has no implication for G League because I think he'll still be on the G League team. I'm not mistaken. I'm not Blake Murphy. I'm not like some super G League expert, but I do know what I saw. And what I saw was a player who is relatively undersized and a player that I liked considerably less than DJ Carton, a player that I liked way less than Jeff Doughton, who went out the door last year, a player that, while I understand at the G League level, you need someone to initiate offense, I just do not understand how he would fit with the Raptors lineup. Stocky, very athletic, seemingly, you know, active, I would say active shooter. He's not an active shooter, but he is a willing shooter. And you do like you like players who are a threat to score, especially you're losing a gunner like Gary Trent Jr. You think to yourself, could he have been that type of player, right? Could Jamias Ramsey or, one of those guys develop into that type of player? I'm not saying, he couldn't amount to something at some point. He's still relatively young, and frankly, most of these kids are. I just don't see it. There's nothing popping out to me the way it was with Jamison Battle, where with Jamison Battle, it was like, oh, there's a separation here. And I think that that's really significant because Jamias Ramsey is not only more experienced at the NBA level, I would argue he's also way more athletic. And the fact that Jamison Battle's decision making and overall maturity as a player, not as a person, but as a player, is sticking out in such a major way against NBA competition makes me very bullish on the idea that it was going to be him. And obviously, you only have 3 two-way spots. I have no idea who would have gotten the 4th two-way spot if one existed. I have a feeling it would have been Brandon Carlson, though. So that's how I see it. That's going to be another question that we're going to star here. Any more questions that we're going to star? Pick up Lonnie Walker. OKC still has Ramsey's G League rights. Okay, cool. So Jamias Ramsey is going to the OKC. Okay. There we go. Okay. Now, Zero Sum. Hey Rob. Actually, let me get to Zero Sum. Thank you so much for the super chat. Let me get to this one first. Hey Rob, who's your favorite prospect in the upcoming draft that you would like to see on the Raptors? Great question. So every single time this is brought up, there's a couple of players that I really like, and I need to watch more of them to make an even better educated opinion. A lot of people are really high on Ace Bailey, including a scout that I trust implicitly. Like I really trust him, and he's been right a lot. And he's telling me, he's like, man, like this is a really good player. Like you need to watch this kid. And I'm gonna watch a lot of Ace Bailey. I was wrong about Brandon Miller. I mentioned that in the earlier live when I was bitching and complaining about Scottie Barnes, and also kudos to the couple of podcasters who reached out and were just like, okay, we accept, we'll stop. Cool. I think Ace Bailey's decision making worries me. And that's nothing new. And that's something that's been there for a long time. I think sometimes he gets tunnel vision, and I don't know how fixable that is, but he is very athletic and he is very interesting for his size. And he has a lot of defensive tools that could make him into a two-way terror. So, yeah, when you're looking at the Raptors and you're looking at the talent, it's clear that he and Cooper Flag sit atop this draft. However, in terms of players that I really like, I think Kaman Malawak, just given how much Joe Tuamu spoke about him, could be a very interesting player. I also really liked his tape a couple of years ago. So I'll be really curious to see how he does at Duke. There's been some bearishness on his jump shooting, and there's initially some talk about, oh, can he shoot? Can he not shoot? I mean, I'd be very curious about it, and I'm sure the Raptors will be as well, given Masai Ujiri's deep roots with African scouting. That Kaman will be really high up on our board, and I think three other players that really stick out. One is VJ Edgecombe from from the Bahamas, who is currently at Baylor. I think he's going to be a very interesting player, and I just really like his athletic profile. And I don't know where he fits on the Toronto Raptors necessarily long term, though. I think he could be a great pairing with Scottie. He's just so athletic. Some people compare him to Dwayne Wade or Michael Jordan. I mean, I have no idea how his game will progress, but what I do know is he has the potential to be the best guard defender in the NBA one day. Again, potential is something, but listening to his interviews, you also get a really good idea of where he's coming from and how he wants to put Bahamas on the map. And, the showing that he had this summer, it was very interesting. Colin Murray Boyles is another guy, bit of a tweener that really sticks out to me. And Dink Pate, I apologize if I'm saying that name wrong. I'll get better with it. Like, if the Raptors do shift their focus from making the play-in or the playoffs or being a competitive basketball team to the draft, there's going to be a world of prospects to cover. If they end up trading some pieces, I'm positive the 2025 and 2026 picks will be of high value to the Raptors given their organizational focus right now. So I would not be surprised at all if we spend a great deal of this year talking about draft prospects. And that could be really fun because unlike, with last year's draft where it was a lot of like, okay, what the hell is this draft? There's a lot to get really excited about. And I would never look down on that part of being a fan, right? Like if you do end up losing, what else do you have to look forward to other than bullish expectations about the future and, you know, what is coming down the pipeline in the draft? Like I think that's important. Now, Zero Sum with the super chat here. Thank you for the super chat, by the way. Hey Rob, do you have minor concerns from yesterday about the lack of two-man game between Scottie and IQ? Is there something I am missing? So I wouldn't say there's something you're missing, but I do think that it's not necessarily as important to me how connected those two are right now. I know eventually they will be great together. Like with more experience and more time, like there was a lot of, oil and water with those two last year as well, where they just couldn't quite seem to figure out how to play with each other. And I don't think that has anything to do with any natural synergy. I think that's just time. I think it's just reps. You know what I mean? Like I think they just need reps together, and they'll figure it out. They're both really smart players, and Scotty is just willing to bend when to fit in with players. I think Scotty Grady have the most natural synergy of the players in the group, and Emmanuel Quickly and Jakob Pertl have a lot of great natural synergy, right? I think Yak has a great synergy also with potentially RJ Barrett. So or Scotty Barnes. I mean, Yak fits in a lot of lineups. And I also think off the bench, you'll probably see a lot of great chemistry between Scotty, Jamal Shad, and Ochai and Jacoby Walter. So yeah, the fact that Scotty and IQ, presumably your two best players going into this year, some people would say RJ and Scotty, some people would say IQ and Scotty. I'm not really here to fight you, whichever way you want to put it. Some people would say the fact that they didn't play super well together last night, but they were both on the court when that big run happened in the third. I think it was Emmanuel Quickly who found Scotty Barnes open for a couple of shots. I think Scotty is going to have, I've just seen Scotty succeed with so many players that are like Emmanuel Quickly that I think their chemistry will work itself out. Like there's a strong will. And last year, one thing I noticed was initially when the trade happened, there wasn't a lot of communication on the court. And I was a little bit worried about that because when the trade happened, I was like, Scottie's going to love Emmanuel quickly. That was my first thought based on everything I knew about Emmanuel quickly. I was like, this is a player that Scottie is going to vibe with. They're both great people. They're both very faith based. I know that that doesn't matter to some people, but sometimes it matters to other people, like how people view the world, and how people view the world will often dictate how they solve problems as well. So I just thought they were such a seamless fit as people, and that matters when you're trying to create a team. I think it matters how people fit in together as people. And yeah, they just didn't have this great chemistry last year. And then Scotty got hurt. And then I saw some of that chemistry coming together on the bench. And you would see them sitting together, you would see them working together, you would see them in practice, they were joking around. So yeah, they just need to have some conversations about how they want to play off each other, but they'll figure it out. Scotty and IQ synergy in the clutch worried me last year. Sure. Yeah. And I mean, speaking of oil and water, it was Emmanuel quickly kicking his leg out, I believe, that injured and ended Scotty Barnes' season. So yeah. Okay. Barrett and Barnes. I mean, sure. I mean, let me know when this video goes up which prospects you're really looking forward to in next year's draft. I think there's about 14 to 15, including a guard who is 18 years old that I've been talking about a lot on Instagram. And he seems very interesting over in Europe. I think you're going to get two very good players. So, guys like Jamison Battle. I think Ulrich is safe. I mean, that's just my read on it. I think Ulrich is safe for like 3 years. Like, he can regress, he can struggle. Like they really believe in him, I think. But with DJ Carton and Jamison Battle, I think those are two guys when you look at this roster, those two guys. So right now, I'm looking at their rookies. They're 4 rookies. And, sometimes there are rookies where it's like, okay, I remember the last time the Raptors had 4 rookies. It was Ura Slokar. Who was it? It was Ura Slokar, Roko Lenny Ukic, Joey Graham, Charlie Villanueva, right? Charlie got traded. Joey stayed for a bit. Roko came over a year later and he spent 1 year, and he spent 2 years. And Ura Slokar was gone literally that year. So yeah, like these players don't last long. I think the difference is this year, just based on how the Raptors think, I think Jonathan Mobo is here for the long term. I think Ulrich is here for the long term. I think Jakobe's here for the long term. And I think Jamal Shedd's here for the long term. So I think these 4 guys are going to stick around, you know? So then the question then becomes like, who's really moving aside when you have 2 picks next year? And I think that will be the logical thing would be that Bruce Brown, Chris Boucher, guys like this get converted into a 2-for-1, and then one of Ochai Davion, right? Or something like that. But I'm actually very curious at this point. One of the things that I keep thinking about is there any chance that one of the players that I think is not going to get moved actually gets moved? Like, what's the likelihood that Grady Dick gets moved, right? Like, if he really pops, like, is there someone that can just give you an offer, or are they really married to this guy? Like, are they just like, no, we love Grady so much that we're not trading him? What about the availability of an RJ Barrett? I keep thinking the obvious suspects to get moved are Chris Boucher and Bruce Brown, because those are the guys who they've been trying to move. But could they move an RJ Barrett? Would they ever move off an Emmanuel quickly? Would they move off a Jakob Pertl? I don't know. If in order of, guys most likely to be moved, I think I would put it as number 1, Chris Boucher, number 2, Bruce Brown, number 3, Davion Mitchell, number 4, Ochai Agbaji, number 5, Jakob Pertl, number 6, RJ Barrett, number 7, Kelly Olynyk. I think the rest are safe. Oh, Bruno Fernando, number 1 by far, but I think by moved, I mean actually traded, not just outright waived for nothing. Another question from Cersei Cats here at Pinstar Basketball. If you were going to try and upgrade one starter, what starter would it be? Grady, obviously. I would upgrade Grady to Cam Thomas. Sorry, Cam Johnson. I made this case yesterday. I think Grady's going to be fantastic. I think he's been fantastic. He's been really, really, really good. That being said, Like there's like a clear separation between Grady Dick and the other four starters on your team in terms of like experience and quality. Now, at some point, you're starting a 20-year-old and you take the lumps with it, but there's no reason he can't just play 25 minutes off the bench. I guess that's my point here. Grady is getting borderline untouchable for me. Grady looks fantastic. Fantastic. Nobody is saying he is not fantastic. I'm saying starters. And the issue with the Grady RJ pairing is you have two relatively weak defenders at the wing. And that's tough because Emmanuel quickly, if you want my honest opinion, yesterday did not look great defensively himself. So that is three defenders that Scottie and Yak have to cover for. That's a lot to cover for. He fits perfect with Scottie. Well, that's the thing. Scottie's going to play a ton of minutes with the second unit. So showed a lot of heart in watching him duel Cam Johnson was amazing. Agreed. Absolutely agree. Do you think Jakobe goes to the G League? And if he does, how long do you think he will stay? I think Jakobe should have a stint in the G League, and I hope he takes it in stride and seems like the type of person who will. But yeah, there's like I'm very like I get higher on him with every passing week, and it's weird because I haven't seen him play basketball in like you know a few months now. The last time we saw him play basketball was I think July with the Vegas Summer League. That's August, September, October. Like we're 3 months removed from the last time I watched Jacoby Walter play basketball. But there's just something about him, and I don't know if it's because I had that interview with his trainer with Eric. Shout outs to Eric. I don't know if it is because I'm just looking way too much into his high school tape. I don't know if it's because I went back and watched, I think his second or third game with Baylor, and I just saw something there. I don't know if it's finding out that the Raptors were higher on him than 19, way higher, that certain teams were considering him in the lottery, but things just broke a different way. I don't know if it's that because, like who really screwed it up? It was the Pistons. Like Ron Holland going fifth kind of just messed up everybody's draft board because that was not supposed to happen. Even though I had actually called it at the draft, I was like, Ron Holland goes fifth. It's just such a Pistons thing to do. But yeah, that kind of broke the draft apart and it sent certain guys coming down and Zach Edey moving up the draft as well also put some guys down. And I think teams approach this draft more positionally than ever before, thinking like, oh, I need a wing here. And I guess some people just preferred, certain wings over Jacoby. But nevertheless, he fell. He fell where he fell. And I have a feeling that he could be like a surprisingly good player. I'd put his floor as DeLon Wright, not as like a one-to-one comparison, but like that tier of player. Like he'll have a 10-year career and be like a career role player as a basement on his career. Like I don't see a way in which he's not an NBA player. You know what I mean? Like certain first round picks, like Jalen Hood Shafino last year, where certain people were really high on him, and it's like it's looking increasingly likely that he's not going to be an NBA player. Yeah, I don't see that. I don't see a world of possible. I don't see a chance in hell that Jacoby's that. So, at worst case, you've got that. There was an interesting podcast today on Raptors Republic between Louis Zatzman and Samson Folk. Cool, to hear two guys who are reasonably smart talking about the Raptors, and they were asked one of the mailbag questions was which players, how many players on this team could realistically make an all-star team? And I think the answers were Lewis said one and Sampson said 1+1, which is to say that one of Jacoby, Grady, RJ, or IQ would make it at least once. But the consensus largely was that the Raptors have one all-star player and likely one among all these other guys who can make it once, like a Jamal McGlure, Fred VanVleet, or Chris Kaman. Okay. So here's the thing. Making all-stars hard. League is getting really talented. We do not have any player as untalented as Jamal McGlure making all-star teams in the East or the West. So if it's hard to imagine Scottie being a lock to make All-Star this year, and that's what I'm saying. Like Scottie's absolutely one of the top 25 players in the league by far, but you don't know if Trey Young is on a heater with the Hawks and the Hawks are the sixth seed. Do you give him that spot? You know what I mean? Like you don't know if the Knicks overperform, does Carlton Towns get that spot? You know what I mean? Like a lot of talent is in the East right now, and it will be difficult. Evan Mobley taking a major jump and the Cavaliers jumping to top three. Like, would they give him that? Right. So personally, I think Scottie's a lock to make All Star, but some people don't feel that way. And if he's not, well, then what is the gap between him and the next best player? And I was thinking about it a lot. And it's easy to say, like, yeah, I think Emmanuel quickly could be an All Star, but it's like you also have to ask yourself over who? Over Jalen Brunson? Over Tyrese Maxey? Over Tyrese Halliburton? Like, who could he make an All Star team over? Over Trey Young? You know what I mean? Like he's very, very firmly in the Terry Rozier, tier right now, with the expectation that he will get better. I think the thing that could really help the All-Star chances of an Emmanuel Quickley or an RJ Barrett is the style of offense and the type of offense that the Raptors run is generally going to influence your numbers positively in two major ways. Number one, because you're playing with three ways. One, you're playing with a super unselfish superstar in Scottie Barnes, who's actually going to let you eat. So your numbers are not going to be suppressed because you're playing with another great player. So Scottie is so multi-dimensional. It wouldn't surprise me if 1 year in his prime he averages 21, 12, 9. You know what I mean? And that's how he gets his game off. But it's not like Luca where he's just going to go out and have 46% usage and 42% usage and kill all the. You have to adjust to him. He's actually very good at adjusting to you. And because Darko has this strategy of running him with the second unit and getting some of his offense there, it's a good chance that Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett will actually be having that opportunity to score a lot. So that could be good. Plus, you have a whole bunch of other great passers on the team. Guys like Jakob Poeltl, Kelly Olynyk, Bruce Brown. All these things help guys get more efficient offense. Again, last year we looked at the metrics, and I think the Raptors were generating some of the most efficient offense in the league. They just weren't hitting shots. Okay. Well, if Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett progress as shooters and Scottie Barnes progresses as a shooter, maybe some of those brilliantly open shots are now going in. So I think there's a lot to be said about the lack of offensive talent on this team, but also the defensive upgrades and the passing upgrades across the board. The guys who are shot makers may also benefit tremendously because their numbers could balloon. Again, it's very unlikely, barring an injury, that the Raptors will ever be good enough over the next 2 years, 3 years to warrant two All-Stars. And that's also the narrative here, right? At some point, you have to be so good to warrant two All-Stars. Like you have to have Dame and Giannis, Kyrie and KD, you know what I mean? Like Jalen Brown, Jason Tatum, right? So who is on that level? So I may tend to agree that it might just be one. But if there is like an all-star ranking of like who's most likely to least likely, I'm inclined to say that it's probably, is it Grady or is it IQ or is it Jakobe or is it Ulrich long term? That's, I mean, either RJ or IQ. Yeah, man. I mean, look, ESPN sees RJ Barrett, and ESPN is a good barometer for how American media, which is to say, a lot of the people who vote for All Star and stuff, are coaches. But the people who are influencing the narrative and the voting typically, and the coaches, of course, exist primarily in the United States. So I think it's a pretty good feel for how the league feels about it, right? Like I don't need the ESPN rankings to tell me that the vast majority of Americans think that Paolo Banchero is a better player than Scottie Barnes. I also don't need the ESPN rankings to tell me that we have cleared the Cade versus Scottie debates. So overall, because RJ played on a really large media market and because he will be the benefactor of, an assist heavy system, and he's a pretty good rebounder, and he plays in a transition offense, and he's being optimized as a second option next to Scottie or a third option next to Scottie and IQ. And they are both unselfish enough to let him, score 30 every now and again. I mean, he could very easily average 23, 24 points per game. again, it's not a matter of how many all-stars do you have. I think I'm more concerned with how many all-star level players do you have? Like how many Emmanuel Quickly seasons would be on par with the average all-star season? Because again, I've said it before, there are not 24 all-stars per year. There's about 40 to 42. Some don't make it because of health. Some don't make it because of, we can't give two for the same team. Some don't get in because their teams are not good. So there's a lot of reasons that somebody would suffer from that. But, per uh, NBA reference or basketball reference, an all-star season is roughly 3 to 5 box plus minus around there, right? So what players on this team could really get to that point? I think Emmanuel quickly can easily get there for 3 to 4 years. So I'm not saying 1 year. I'm saying he could get there for 3 to 4 years. I think RJ could get there 1 to 2 years. I think Grady could get there for like 6 years, just given where he is and his age. I think Jakobe could potentially get there also. And I think Ulrich could get there in a really big way. I don't think Jonathan Mobo is going to get there, but if he does, I think it'll be just below that, and it'll be for a long time. I could look back on this video and again, years from now, just wonder, how did I not put Jamal Shed in that conversation? I don't know, man. Maybe Jamal Shed could be are you really telling me at the age of 22 that there is a discernible gap between Jamal Shed and Fred VanVleet as prospects? There is not. I would take Jamal Shed over Fred VanVleet as a prospect at the same age. And Fred became an all-star. So maybe Jamal and Jonathan Mobo have that one-time all-star thing. Now, did I just say that the Raptors have 8 future all-stars? No. I'm just saying on the maximum upside, you cannot tell me that there's a world in which Fred VanVleet became an all-star, but Jamal Shed can never become an all-star. You can't tell me there's a world in which Pascal became a 2-time All-NBA and Ulrich can never become an all-star. Do you know what I mean? I like Grady, but it's too inconsistent. He's 20 years old. Is that fair to say? He's 20 years old? I think in terms of absolute upside, he's probably Scottie's like most upside heavy teammate just because of where he's gotten to at his age. And again, I don't think he has a better shot at being an all-star than Franz Wagner. So what does that say? Jacob Isaac, do you think Scottie will up his scoring to around 25 points per game? Thanks for the question. Thanks for the super chat. I think he can if he wants to at any time. I am more concerned with something else. So the raw totals will be great for narratives around all NBA and it'll be great for fantasy league and it'll be great for parlays. I don't think my question is if he will, because I mean, if you look at his stats in preseason, and again, it's preseason, so take it with a grain of salt. I think he averaged like 18 points in like 26 minutes, something like that. Was that what I saw today? I mean, that projects to around 25 points per game on his regular minutes, right? His usage has been way up, but we haven't seen him with an RJ Barrett who takes a lot of shots. We haven't seen him for the vast majority of those games with an Emmanuel Quickly. His numbers and his usage did go down with Quickly on the court. The Raptors are leaning into a ton of 2 guard lineups. There's a lot of non-shooters on this team and a lot of not very great scorers on this team. So maybe Scottie will, because of a lack of shot making from guys like Gary Trent Jr., Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, etc., guys who were on the team before, maybe this is the type of season where you'll need him to get 25. I'm not looking at that though. What I'm looking at is how efficient is the offense when he's on the court versus how efficient is the offense when he's off the court. So he is just such a multifaceted driver of offense, like as a playmaker, as a scoring threat, as a deep threat now, as a post hub. I think he does so many things for you. So I'm just very curious to see how the offense hums with him more so than the actual numbers. I think the numbers will take care of themselves. In terms of could he score 25 points per game? Yeah, I think he could. Would it be the most efficient way to win basketball games right now? That is worth asking. I think the most efficient formula to winning basketball games would probably be him averaging 23, RJ averaging 21, IQ averaging 18, Yak averaging 14, Grady averaging 16, like a very balanced attack. You know what I mean? Where you don't know where it's coming from. But I think it's also important to realize that when you need one down the stretch, you need to have a clear pecking order. And I think he needs to be it. I think it needs to be, you know, how great would it be if BBQ scored 60 points per game? Well, what did I say? I think I said 24, like 20, 21, and 18. That is 60 points per game. I mean, personally, I wouldn't care. Like, if you remember, I think Sam Cassell, Ray Allen, and Big Dog Glenn Robinson did that. If I'm not mistaken, that trio was pretty much like what this looks like. The only difference here is, well, I wouldn't say the only difference because it was clear to me that Ray Allen was a franchise player there. I think Grady should be around a 12 to 14 point per game scorer. We need the assists and rebounds as well. Well, here's the thing. I think Scottie will get a lot of his scoring with the second unit. That scoring, and it will be necessary because they are pretty depleted of scoring talent. And it's not like Yak and Kelly Olynyk are like super high volume shooters, right? Like they're not guys who are going to come out and gun for their offense the same way that Gary did. So yeah, I mean, it's not so straightforward as like where do you replace Gary's 16 points from, you know? But I do think that there's some logic to say that Scotty will never have been more alive to score than the Raptors have never been more dependent on Scotty to score than they are right now. And I think that that's going to be a great thing. And it was something that I commented on the other day. I said it's actually quite smart to put him in on the floor with all of these really funky offensively challenged lineups because it's forcing growth. Like it's forcing him to do the one thing that he's not great at, which is generating offense from a standstill in tight quarters, right? You want him to become surgical in the mid post. You want him to be able to drive, without a screen. Like he would love that. But even with one screen, like it'd be great for him to be able to drive and get all the way to the rim. You want him to be able to generate more offense at the line. So all of this is very good. And what you don't want is for him to be able to swing it out to Gary and have Gary, bail him out. So I think that's important. Hopefully Walter will pop. I think he will. Anyways, guys, have a great night. And thank you to Jacob Isaac and Zero Sum for the super chats. We will be live again tomorrow or the next day. I might just take tomorrow off just to get my head right. We did a live earlier. I'm not sure how I feel about it. Like I felt like I was sort of just like bitching and complaining about, not getting credit for the Scotty takes. Honestly, I'm over it right now. I think I just needed to get it off my chest and no more of that stuff going forward. Like we're good. We're good now. You guys say what you want to say, but yeah. All right. Nick laughs saying, "Oh wow, Max Strus is out for the Cavs." Yes, Max is going to miss 6 weeks if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Liberal saying, "Thank you for the content, bro. Like and subscribe, folks." Absolutely. And yes, as I mentioned, we will. Yeah. So I'm getting ready for Wednesday. I'm very excited. We're gonna have a new format, and Thierry Fontaine listed out a really cool format for the post game live, where I think he laid it out in a comment. And he's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and keep it consistent every single time. Like do it like this. Like give us your gut check, give us the stats, give us the film breakdown if it's there, give us your player of the game, second player of the game, whatever. And then I think he said, what was the other one? Give us your overview, then go to then go to Collins, then go to life lessons, and keep it consistent. So if any of you have a particular format, maybe because I'm not very consistent with the format of a post game live. Sometimes it's film, sometimes it's not film, sometimes we do callers early, sometimes we do long calls, short calls. If you have a format that you're like, that's the way it works best for me, just let me know. You know, yeah. Jakobe Rookie of the Year. That would be very surprising. All right. Talk to y'all later and have a great weekend.